Anyway, welcome back, everybody. We'll make a recording of this for those who aren't here or come in late. Today we're doing, again, 14 prakim a week, so that takes us to pretty much the end of Yehoshua and the beginning of Sefer Shoftim. And what I want to talk about today, last week we talked about the beginning of the book. Today we'll talk about the end of the book. There's one general question, which is, I think we talked about it briefly last week. Is Sefer Yehoshua the end of Chumash or the beginning of Navi? Now, in theory, Chumash should end with, from a thematic point of view, Chumash should end with Sefer Yehoshua. Can anyone explain me why? From a thematic point of view, take the theme of Chumash. Why should Chumash end thematically with Sefer Yehoshua? That's a real simple thematic answer. If you understand what the theme of Chumash is, if you're a Zionist. Okay.
With one being coming into Israel.
Yeah, I mean, if you read Parshat Lech Lecha, we have a background of who this God is and where the nations come from, etc. But the main theme of Bereshit is God choosing a nation to serve Him forever. And in order to be a nation, God promises Zerah, seed to Avram Avinu, and that's filtered down to the 12 tribes coming from Yaakov, and sets aside a land as a vehicle to become that nation. And then, so ideally, Chumash should end when God fulfills His covenants of Sefer Bereshit, takes him out of Egypt, take him out of slavery, enters a covenant Har Sinai, and we conquer the land of Israel and set up a nation to serve God. So therefore, thematically, Chumash should end with the conquest of the land and setting up the nation and becoming a nation serving God, fulfilling the goal of Brit Sinai and the theme of Bereshit. But Chumash ends with Devarim because Moshe dies. So Torah Moshe ends with Moshe's death, but the theme of Chumash ends with Yehoshua, and therefore Yehoshua has a different sort of status. Now, the reason I gave that introduction is because our main topic today will be Yehoshua chapter 24. Because if you remember last week, our main topic last week was chapter 23 in Yehoshua. I'll just review that quickly. My explanation was chapter 23 in Yehoshua was the reason for the book. Because in Yeshua's final speech, he says God kept His promise. Everything God promised came true, but we didn't conquer the land. So what did God promise? Not He'll do it for us, He'll do it with us. Wherever you go, I'll be there for you if you keep my mitzvot. And the book goes through how whenever we took initiative, God was there to help us. And the tribes who took initiative, we'll see this week, got big nachalot. The ones who didn't take initiative barely got any nachalot. It took a long time till they got their nachalot, and they get very little attention in the book. And then we get the 2.5 tribes because they did a good job of conquest, etc. They get a big nachalah and a big explanation in chapters 13 and 14, or chapter 13 at least. But the end of the book has 2 speeches. In the WhatsApps, they talked about those 2 speeches a lot in the WhatsApps that went out yesterday and today, and different opinions they had. So last week, I explained Yehoshua chronologically. His last speech is chapter 23, when he's about to die, explaining the reason for the book. Chapter 24 has to be earlier, because 23 has to be his last speech, because he's about to die. Chapter 24 happened earlier. How much earlier, we have to see. But chapter 24, I'm going to explain, is the end of Chumash. I'll try to explain why. Okay? Now, we'll get to that answer after we study chapter 24, and let's get to work. So now I did that little introduction, and let's study chapter 24 together, pointing out all the questions, and all the questions that come up, the classic explanations, and we'll try to add something. I'll share my screen, chapter 24. First, let's read it, and then we'll, afterwards, we'll format it. I need my Chumash. Where's my Chumash? Probably here. Zoom. Yehoshua. Here we go. Okay. Yehoshua gathers the nation together, all the tribes, in Shechem. Okay. And he calls out to the elders of Israel, to the leaders, and everyone stands in front of God. Now, one thing to point: who's gathering here? The entire nation, or just the leadership? What's it sound like? Ziknei Yisrael and the elders, the leaders, the Shoftim and the Shotrim. Now, is that just a leadership group? Or is that the whole nation, but focusing on the leadership group? I'll give you an example. In Har Sinai, who does God make the covenant with? Let's go back for a minute to Har Sinai, Shemot chapter 19. If you look at the parallel, we'll have a lot of parallels to chapter 19. What happens? God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, remember, tell the people, look what I did for you. The quick historical background. Look what I did for you. I took out of Egypt and brought you here. And then, and look what I did to the Egyptians. Now, are you willing to obey me and keep my covenant? You'll be my special nation. You'll be a Menachem Kadosh. That's the proposition to be my nation, and then we're going to agree to this. But what's Moshe do? Moshe tells this to who? To the elders of Israel, and tells them all these things, and the entire people answer. So why doesn't Moshe tell the entire people? But he tells the Zkenim to tell the people. So again, Moshe talks to the Zkenim, but in order for the Zkenim to relay that to the rest of the people. So the fact that you only have in chapter 24 God talking to the elders might not relate that it's only for the elders, but primarily for the elders to relate to the people. That we'll deal with that later on. Then Yehoshua begins an historical speech. Now, from here on, Pasuk Bet Gimel Daled looks very familiar. And just want to make sure everyone remembers why. I'll just read it quickly. Those our ancestors were living in a world of idol worship, the god of Terach, etc. And God says, I took your ancestors, I took Avram from Mesopotamia, I brought him to the land of Israel, to the land of Canaan. I multiplied his offspring, I gave him Yitzchak, and I gave Yitzchak then Yaakov and Esav. Esav got his Nachla and Har Seir, and Yaakov went down to Egypt to fulfill Brit Ben Abtarim. Okay, and then he continues. Now, tell me quickly, why is Pasuk Bet Gimel Dalet so famous? Real quick. Make sure you guys are awake. What makes them night. Why do we bring them at the Seder night? It's a text proof for an opening statement. Remember, the Mishnah says when we tell the story, start with something derogatory, and that's easy to find. But we have to start, remember, so I need a derogatory statement, and then there's two options, something derogatory about how unfruitful we were or how poor we were. So one opinion is Avadim Ayinu, we were slaves, we were third-class citizens. The other opinion was we were once idol worshippers. So it could be a machloket, whether what's more derogatory, or it could be, does the story of the Exodus begin with Sefer Bereshit, or begin with Sefer Shemot? Avadim Ayinu means I begin with Sefer Shemot, means we are in a mess and God came and saved us. If it begins with Sefer Bereshit, God chose us and wanted us to go down to Egypt to take us out of Egypt. And the question is, when I tell the story of the Exodus, where my narrative begins? Does it begin with our slavery and God saves us, or begins with our purpose, with Sefer Bereshit, and why God puts us into slavery, takes us out of slavery, and entering as preparation for the covenant in Har Sinai? That's an interesting topic. But it's interesting that Yehoshua begins a speech, an historical speech, with our ancestry, starting with the Avot. And why at the Seder? We do that, if you look carefully at the Seder, from a technical point of view, we begin with these psukim, because Mitchil of the Avodah Zarah is the beginning of the story. Avadim Ayinu is only the answer to the son's questions of why then it's different. But from Avadim Ayinu, we go to Brit Ben Abtarim, and we go to, we go from Mitchil of the Avodah Zarah, we go right to Brit Ben Abtarim. Now, if we are doing this properly at the Seder, we would continue Yehoshua Chavdalad. Let's continue Yehoshua Chavdalad and see what he says next. What to say next? Yehoshua says, then after he took Avram, and then chose Yitzchak, and then Yaakov went down to Egypt, V'shtachet Moshe bet Aaron, v'gofet Mitzrayim, I sent Moshe and Aaron, and I punished Egypt for the enslavement, etc. Okay? And then I took you out. That's a really quick summary of Bereshit and Shemot, isn't it? Okay? V'tziet avotechem miMitzrayim v'tevel ha'yama, and you cross the sea. And we have the story of Kriyat Yamsuf. Am Yisrael cried out to God at Yamsuf. We thought we were going to die. And what did God do? You saw with your own eyes how God saved you at the splitting of the sea. And then Vatishvu b'midbar yamim rabim. Paraphrasing what Sefer Devarim says, Vatishvu b'kadesh yamim rabim. You spent many years in the desert. And then you came to the land of the Amorites and the Eber Yarden. And you fought Sichon and Og, etc. And you conquered their land. And then God saved you from Balak and his curse, etc. Didn't listen. Then you crossed the Jordan River, and you came to Yericho, etc. And you fought Yericho and the 7 nations that were there, and God helped you conquer them. We talked about last week. Then I sent in front of you the Tzirah, like he promised in Sefer Shemot and Parshat Mishpatim, and he sent away the Amorites, the kings of the Amorites, and remember, that goes back to Yaakov telling his sons, where God tells Yosef, with the Ephraim and Menashe, I'm giving Shechem echad achecha asher lechachti b'charbi u'v'kashti. That relates to that. We'll get back to that later on. Okay. And I gave you the land which you didn't work on. Now you got houses and buildings, etc., that other people built and fields that other people planted. So you had ready-made cities after you wiped out the enemy. You settled them down. You had vineyards and olive orchards, etc. You didn't plant them, but you reaped their fruit. Now about that. Now, up from Pasuk Aleph to Yud Gimel, are you catching on? Is what's called an historical prologue. Vata is a transition word. Vata knows. In light of this history, I have something to tell you. Now, look at this history real fast. What we just read from Pasuk Bet to, make this smaller, from Pasuk Bet to Yud Gimel was an historical speech, beginning with the Avot and ending with conquering the land of Israel. But are there any major events missing in that quick historical summary that we just read? Look at that summary we did. Is there any major event that's missing? If you had to grade that historical summary.
Har Sinai?
No, Har Sinai must be there, isn't it? Which pasuk is Har Sinai? Take a look again. How could there not be Har Sinai there? Second, let's take a look. We have Sefer Bereshit in pasuk Gimel Daled, Bet Gimel Daled, and then we have the beginning of Sefer Shemot coming out of Egypt. That's important. We have Kriyat Yamsuf, okay, and then we have Kriyat Yamsuf two psukim. Oh, you're right. You're right. We skip. How do you like that? I was just joking. That was for some reason. Yehoshua totally skips Mamad Har Sinai, doesn't he? And that's surprising. Har Sinai is not there. Keep that in mind. We'll leave it right now as a question. But he gets the major events. Why he brings Balak and Bilam? That's a good question. I'll leave that alone for now. But other than why the detail on Balak and Bilam, all the key events are there, very short. A quick summary of Bereshit, the beginning of Shemot. He puts a big deal about Kriyat Yamsuf. And then about Kibush Ever Yarden, conquering Transjordan, conquering the land of Israel, and how God helped us in doing all that. Now, Bata is a transition word, and the question is, why is Yehoshua giving the speech? The speech is a build-up to Yud Daled. So let's read carefully from Yud Daled, and I'm going to pay attention to a word, what's called the word la'avod. We'll pay attention to it. Bata. Now, in light of this, and why am I making big Bata? Let's go back to what we saw before. I'll put up another Chumash here. Not this Chumash, I'll open up a different Chumash. Where are we? Open up Shemot, chapter 19. In the short version of Har Sinai, of Brit Sinai, okay, God tells Moshe goes up and tells Moshe, God calls Moshe up and tells him, tell the following to the people of Israel. Look what I did for you. Historical prologue, one line. Look what I did for you. Look what I did to Egypt. Look, I brought you here. And now, are you willing to enter a covenant with me? Now, are you willing to obey me, keep my covenant? You'll be my special nation, representing me. That's the proposition that God makes. And Moshe relates it to the elders, and the elders relate to the people, and the people answer and say, we're in on it. And then we make and the rest is history. Got that? Hope you got the parallel. If I go back now to Yehoshua Chav Daled, where are we? We don't want that one. We want to unpause that. Share screen, pause, that's not good. Just stop the share. And I'll share it again. If I go back to Yud Daled, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this in a PDF file. It'll be easier. Okay, put it up here. This was the first column. We made the big deal about the things from the Seder. And then the first column here up into Yud Gimel is the historical setup. We're going to read the second column now. I'll make it nice and big. And we're going to read Yehoshua's speech. I'll just do the Hebrew now because the Hebrew is easy. Okay. Bata. In light of this, Yirat Hashem, I want you to fear God and pay attention to the word La'avodat Hashem. Okay? V'ivdu oto b'tamim u'v'emet v'asiu etadim asher avotechem be'ever anahar b'mitzrayim. Number one, get rid of your idol worship. Fear God, serve Him with truth, etc., and get rid of the gods that your ancestors, might have served. Where? In Mesopotamia, in Ever Nahar, and in Egypt. V'ivdu et Hashem, and serve only God. Yeah. V'imra beinechem la'avod et Hashem. If you don't want to serve God, choose today. Who do you want to serve? Do you want to serve the gods of who? That your ancestors served back in Mesopotamia, or the gods of the Emorites of the land? And Yehoshua says, me and my household will serve God. Now, I'm going to give you an analogy for the Americans who are online. Let's say you grew up in Dallas, Texas, okay? And you're a Cowboy fan. I think I got the team right. That's football, okay? And you moved to New York, okay? And now what's the question? Am I going to be a fan of who? Of my oh, by the way, my father grew up in Cleveland, right? And he's a Browns fan because even though they don't win so often, but he's just a Browns fan. That's the ancestral God. The God I grew up with was the God of the Dallas Cowboys. Now I'm living in New York. All my friends are New York Giant. I forgot what team. Jets. Okay, the Jets fans. Now, what do I do now in this new situation? Okay. Do I go by my ancestral God, my family God, or the local God? I hope you got my analogy with sports a little bit. So let's take that analogy. What's Yehoshua telling them? Decide what God you want to serve. Now, before he says that, he tells them, get rid of the gods you might have. Now let's go back. Does that pasuk sound familiar? Where else earlier in Chumash did someone tell somebody, get rid of all the gods, get rid of all your avodah zarah, and come serve God? Anyone remember where that might be?
Yaakov Avinu.
In what story? Who knew that? That's not fair.
Me and
Joey.
To his sons.
Oh, very good, Eitan. Very good. Yeah, where by Yaakov Avinu?
In Shechem.
And Shechem. Oh, does that relate to our story?
Yehoshua
is getting people in Shechem. What a coincidence! In case you forgot, when Abram makes Aliyah this week, Lech Lecha is this week. We're going to read tomorrow morning. God tells Abram to make Aliyah. Where's the first place Abram comes to when he gets to Israel from Mesopotamia? And God tells him, you've arrived. From Shechem, he goes where, Avraham Avinu? To Beit El. And there Mizbech, and calls out in God's name. Yaakov returns in the footsteps of his father from Lavan. He's chosen, he has a family, he has 12 tribes. Okay? God kept his promise. He arrives in Israel in what city? In Shechem. Got it? And from Shechem, he travels to Beit El, doesn't he? But in a very different setup, because what happened in Shechem didn't stay in Shechem. Remember? And Shechem was a disaster. It depends if you're right wing or left wing. I don't want to get into that because I get myself in trouble. But that's a big machloket. Who did the right thing or the wrong thing. But whatever it is, they're being censored by, whoever was charged. So what they did, getting everyone angry, and they would have been wiped out. But when they captured Shechem, they must have taken with them in the booty. They must have collected idol worship stuff. Anyone in his family ever take idols before? Maybe back by Lavan? Oh yeah, remember Rachel? Was that so? There's precedence to all this, and God tells Yaakov, "You want to save yourself? They're about to kill you. All the people, all the neighbors of Shechem. If you want to save yourself, come to Beit El and serve God there." And when Yaakov tells the people, "Just join me and go to Beit El," before you go to Beit El, get rid of all your idol worship. So there's a deep connection between this story and the Shechem story. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, let's continue, because I should ask the question, why are we gathering in Shechem and not, where else could we gather? Does Chumash talk about where to gather when we come to the land of Israel?
Gilgal?
Shiloh?
We can go to Shiloh, we can go to Gilgal. But the first place we're supposed to gather is going to be in Harival, if I'm not mistaken. That's in Dvarim, isn't it? On Harival and Har Grizim, with the Bracha and Chala, which takes place in Yehoshua Perichet, doesn't it? Now, what we do in Harival, if you follow Sefer Dvarim, is to renew the covenant, isn't it? We read the Torah out loud. We teach the Torah, Beritev. Read the Torah. We're going to read basically all the speech in Sefer Dvarim, which begins with the Ten Commandments, and we're going to reestablish our Brit. So it could be that if Yehoshua Chavdalah didn't happen now, it might have happened when? Back in Perichet. And historically, chronologically, it happened in Perichet. When we came to Harival, and we gathered in Shechem, which is in between our Grizim and Harival, and we make this covenant, we'll see in a minute, but we save it for the end of the book for thematic reasons. So it's out of chronological order, which we proved already, because Chav Gimel was the end of the book. And for some reason, I guess I'll call it the epilogue. We can use it to close the book. I'll try to explain why. But there's a covenant, we'll see in a minute. There's an event happening in Shechem, which is similar to Mount Sinai, with an historical prologue and a brit. But the problem is Yehoshua is giving them what choice? Do you want to accept this brit, yes or no? Now, what did you learn in kindergarten already? That when we said Nasa v'nishma, it was binding on all generations, wasn't it? If not, God would have put the mountain over our heads. So how can Yehoshua have the chutzpah to do what? As we'll see in a minute. To suggest to the people, it's up to you, you decide. How can he give them the choice if we already made the commitment to be God's people forever? You with me? Now, so let's read and prove to you this idea that there's a brit happening, which is very similar to Mount Sinai, but happening now in the land of Israel. So let's continue sharing the screen. And okay, keep on time. Okay, I'm going to run out of time in a minute. Let's go back to Yeshua Chav Daled in the nice big source sheet. Okay, so pay attention to the word Lavodat Hashem. So then, Vimra Menachem, remember, decide who you want to think. Your ancestral God, the Mesopotamian gods, the local lands of the God, of Canaanite gods, or the God who took you out of Egypt. Okay, but me and my family, Yeshua saying, I'm in this for sure. You want to join? Up to you. Vayan Am v'yomer Chalila lanu v'yazov et Hashem lavod elim acharim v'chas v'shalom. Works our God. Why? Because Hashem Elokeinu. Remember Hashem Echad. Ki Hashem Elokeinu. He's the God who took us out of Egypt. That's the first line of the Ten Commandments, isn't it? Beit Avadim. The people are quoting the Brit at Har Sinai. And Basher Sadenu would call it Tot Agdolot Eila. Vaishmin v'chaderach asher lachnu ba. That's Yeshua's introductory speech is the background for his statement. Do you want to serve the gods of Terach, your ancestral gods, or the gods of Egypt that you saw? Or do you want to serve the God who took you out of Egypt? And now you see how the historical background relates to the people, Yeshua's statement and the people's statement. Okay. Then we continue the story. He got rid of all the nations, like he said before. So the people were simply quoting, in light of Yeshua's speech, we agree with you, we're in on this. Gam anachu na'avod et Hashem ki hu Eloheinu. So this is like a full commitment to be God's people. Now that's it's a sort of nasa v'nishma in a more emphatic way. We're going to serve God. Okay. Now, what should Yeshua say? Okay, let's sign the document. To our surprise, Yeshua tries to discourage them, which is even more surprising. Bad enough he gives them the option to leave, but he's discouraging them. Yeshua lo tuchlu la'avod et Hashem kilim toshimu el kanahu lo yisar pi Shechem. That's Brit Sinai, the first luchot with midat hadin. If you're God's people, he'll be strict. If you sin, he'll have to punish you right away, like he did with Chet HaEgel. Ki tazvu et Hashem, if you leave God and you serve other gods, and then God will again have to punish you again, and he'll wipe you out after he did good for you. In other words, if you break your covenant, accepting this covenant is dangerous because there's consequences if you don't follow the covenant. That job is dangerous. Vayimra el Yehoshua lo ki et Hashem na'avod. I hope you understand why I'm highlighting the word na'avod all through the story. You guys are witness to what you just said. You decided to be employees, remember, not consumers. Okay? And now, again, now get rid of your idol worship. After conquering the land and winning some battles, you probably have in the booty idol worship. Get rid of it all and turn your hearts to Hashem, your God, the God of Israel. And here's the big line, Chav Daled. Remember 24:24. Okay, and then the fact Yeshua makes the brit with the people here, got it? The brit with the I think I want to use that to support that the whole nation gathers in Shechem, and it's in Harival and belongs back in Perichet. Okay, and they do, but they make the Chok HaMishpat in Shechem, which is between Har Gerizim and Harival. Now, that's the end of the parak. Not the end of the parak. That's the end of the story in the covenant. So now I want to use this to explain why it's out of order and why this is happening. Let's go back to what we learned in Shemot 24:7, that when we said Nasa v'nishma, it's binding on all generations. Now, think like a lawyer. If you take this case to court, right? Why would someone say, I want out of this covenant? What was wrong with the covenant we made at Har Sinai? At Har Sinai, yeah, when we came out of Egypt. Why are Chazal saying it was like a mountain over our heads? Because what pshat? Do we have a choice or not to accept the covenant? In Shemot Yutet, in Shemot chapter 19, when we accept the covenant, could we have said no or not? In pshat. In pshat, we could have said no because God said it's up to you, right? The word is im. Im shemot tishmo b'kolei, u'shmartem et briti v'tim skula. And it's not information, it's saying that people have to agree to it. Because what's the option if we say no? We're not God's people. We can be a goy gadol, but not a goy kadosh. God can fulfill Brit Avot and give us the land without having Brit Sinai. There's a possibility to enter the land of Israel, conquer the land, and not be a nation representing God. God can fulfill Brit Avot and make the nation a goy gadol, like he promised Avram. But a goy kadosh, God doesn't tell Avram. That's the goal, but doesn't say that yet. we can't become a goy gadol until first we become a goy kadosh. We become a goy coming out of Egypt. We become a nation. We're independent. We're sovereign on ourselves. Now we're about to conquer a land. But we can't, in theory, we can be a goy gadol and not be a goy kadosh. You can't be a goy kadosh unless you take upon yourself that commitment to follow God's laws. And we could have said no. But why couldn't we say no at Har Sinai? Give me a logical reason why you couldn't say no. But let's say God put a gun through their head instead of a mountain over their head. Could you get out of a contract that you sign under duress? A good lawyer can get you out of a contract if it's signed under duress. Now, why are we under duress? What do we need God for? We're in the desert, all alone. What do we need God for? We need God for food. We've been getting food for the last couple of weeks, with the manna, but that's a miracle. We've been getting water from that magical rock. But without God, what are we afraid of? We need God for food, we need God for water, we need God for protection. So I said yes because we were in need. What's changing now that's different in the desert? What's changed in our history now? So a Zionist would say, oh, now we're in the land of Israel, which is fine. So you might say, I need a new covenant because we're in the land of Israel. But I have also beaten Neviim, we'll talk about it in a minute. But what's the main thing that's changed from a legal point of view, from a commitment point of view? Anyone want to suggest? Now that the land is conquered, what's different?
No longer as a need as we were in the desert.
We grew up. We're not babies anymore. We don't need our parents anymore. We milked our parents. Now they can get those. They can say that we're on our own now. We don't need God for food. Why? We can grow our own food. We don't need God for water. Hopefully it'll rain. Or we can do a rain dance. Or maybe we'll serve a Baal God, whatever it might be. Because I'm not totally dependent on God like I was in the desert. And now when you make the commitment to be God's people, no longer under duress, it's much more binding. Hope my point's clear? Now, Yehoshua is not saying the Brit Sinai is over because he's saying he and his family will serve God. Did God make a similar offer to Moshe Rabbeinu? Remember after Chet HaEgel? Remember what did God tell Moshe Rabbeinu? Let me wipe them out. I'll make you the nation. There's Brit Avot can't be broken. And Yehoshua is saying, I'll keep Brit Sinai, but who says Brit Sinai is binding on everybody? Now, once I have Brit Sinai and I have T'chochochot, what's God say? Keep my laws, I'll bless you. Don't keep my laws, I'll punish you. What might someone say? I want out. But logically, why can't someone say, I don't want the schar, I don't want the onesh, I don't want the reward, I don't want the punishment. I want out. I don't want to be Jewish. Now, where does Chumash talk about that? That's Parshat Nitzavim, isn't it? Remember? It's binding on future generations as well. And if a yachid, an individual, remember? Who's turning away from God. Chapter 29 in Sefer Dvarim. I'll remember Parshat Nitzavim. We don't have time to share the screen. But God's telling now that we're a nation, that we're we went through the 40 years in the desert, and we understand what we're getting into, and we're more mature now. And remember, and now, are you willing now to accept the covenant? Now the covenant's going to be set for everybody, and you can't break out of the covenant. But again, that was the wording in Nitzavim, which goes together with the Brit and Har, which goes hand in hand with the brachot klot that are going to be read at Harival. Remember the end of the speech in Devarim, in Parshat Nitzavim and Vayelech. So what I'm getting at is that, or Kitavon and Nitzavim. What I'm getting at is that now that we're in the land of Israel and we're no longer under duress, there's a value in Am Yisrael restating their commitment to be God's people, no longer under duress, because once we've conquered the land and we have a land and we can make our own living and we're not we're in need of God thematically, but we're not in need of God in a practical point of view. Now we can make the commitment as God's people, no longer under duress, and there's this value for gathering the nation together and making that commitment. Why in Shechem? Symbolically, that's where Abram came to when he first came to the land. Symbolically, it's maybe a tikkun for what happened with Yaakov, etc. It fits with the Brit we make in Harival, which is in Sefer Devarim, which leads up to, remember, the Brit in Nitzavim. So for all those reasons, it makes sense that Chumash ends not only when we conquer the land of Israel and set up a nation, when God kept his promise, and we remake our commitments. We restate our vows and our commitment as God's people, now no longer under duress. In that sense, Perach Avdal is a beautiful ending of Chumash, because the theme of Chumash, of Nasa v'Nishma, of becoming a nation, is God's fulfilled his side of the covenant, and we're restating our commitment to keep our side of the covenant, which is Lavodat Hashem. And therefore, now, on the thing, I know there's all the other answers. The answer Rabbedan in his share that they quote on thing, there's only for the people who converted in Shechem. That's Rabbi Ben-Nun's Gisha that Rabbedan was quoting, I'm pretty sure, in that one. I know in the WhatsApp there was a bunch of different articles. My approach is a little bit different, but you can read them all and judge, etc. Again, I'm not saying wrong or right, etc. I'm just giving a bit of a different approach from a thematic point of view. I'm looking at the end of Yehoshua, chapter 24 is the end of Chumash, where the book up until Perach Gimel is about God keeping his promise, and if something went wrong, you're to blame. But now, on our side, we're making a commitment. We're taking the commitment of Har Sinai to be God's people. Now, what's it explain? What was missing in the historical prologue? That was a big question that I think, which is the anchor of my share. Why did Yehoshua skip Har Sinai in the prologue? And don't read the Kofrim on this. They're a disaster. So don't even know. If you know the Kofrim, with the Bible critics, what they do with this, well, they go crazy. No, they don't even look there. And I don't agree with it. Don't worry. But it's. I'm trying to answer the question: why is it missing? Because they have a good point. What's it missing there? How come Yehoshua doesn't mention Har Sinai? Now it makes perfect sense why he doesn't mention Har Sinai. Why? Because the whole purpose of his covenant is to redo Har Sinai, because that wasn't binding. So what does God talk about? The commitment that God fulfilled. God chose your ancestors. He took you out of Egypt. He fulfilled Brit Bein Tarim. And everything God promised in Brit Bein Tarim and Brit Milah, God kept. Now are you going to keep your side of the Brit? That's why God's Yeshua's historical speech, he doesn't talk about our commitment. He talks about how God fulfilled his commitment. God did what he promised, and now will you do what you promised? So are you going to accept this willingly, recognizing the responsibility? It's knowing what you're getting into. So you can't say, I didn't know what I was getting into. Yeah, Jeff, question? Oh, just say hi. I was in LA for Simchat Torah, so I saw your old neighborhood and stuff.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just thinking about my son. So
okay. Already, I think my time is about up. But any other quick questions? Otherwise, we'll do a quick review of Chavdal. We'll do a quick review of what the second half of the book was. But the main thing I wanted to do today was to explain why Perach Avdal ends the book, why most likely it happened earlier, definitely before Perach Gimel. In my opinion, it makes sense it happened in Perach. Now, Perach might be a little bit later as well. When we go to Har Grizim and Har Ival, we're after at least a certain stage of conquest. When we had after Yericho and the Ai, we don't do it the day we cross the Jordan, but at the time we cross the Jordan. But it makes sense that once we get the middle of the mountain range, we take the Ai, we get through. Yeah, Eitan.
Wasn't it Purim that it has a famous idea that we fully kept it in Har Sinai?
You hit the jackpot. Okay. When Chazal say Kimu v'Kiblu in the time of that goes back to they're purposely relating what's happening in Megillat Esther to Yehoshua, aren't they? Give me a proof. Arim Ukufat Chomam Yehoshua Benun. Right? Where do we celebrate Shushan Purim? In Arim Ukufat Bimot Yehoshua Benun. We're bringing Israel back into the picture because the whole background to the Megillah is that by Shendi they should have fulfilled Abram's goal to come to the land of Israel, and he should have fulfilled that, and we didn't. We didn't come back. We built the temple. Remember at the time of Daryavesh, and God's calling his people. Read what they call Deutero Isaiah. God's calling upon read this week's Haftarah. Come back already, last week and this week. You're in exile. Come back from Tsumi Bavel. Get out of Eretz Kasdim. Come back and be my people, and God, has this miraculous story how He saves us from in exile. He saves us from ourselves. With King Achashverosh, was he a wise king or a crazy king? We don't know, but God uses him as a tool to save His people. And but the answer, what should happen? That should lead the people to return, but the people don't return. But that's the Kimu B'Kiblu is going back to. Sefer Yehoshua should be happening again. Anyway, that's a whole question how you read Megillat Esther. But this is the real Kimu V'Kiblu, in my opinion. And it should be happening again, but that's a class on Megillat Esther. Okay, now I'm going to take my outline of the book and just real quickly go through. Let me go back to the source sheet. On the source sheet, I'll share with you later. We'll put it on in the WhatsApp. We compared Devarim with the Yehoshua 24 one. That's the Moshe Rabbeinu's speech about how you were rebellious against God since you came. That's again Parshat Ekev, and also in chapter 29 in Devarim about Brit Nitzavim with the history before the Brit. Okay, we talked about God promising to bring you to land, to send a malach to lead you and help you conquer the enemies. And then in Shemot, we talk about, this is the main thing, Shemot with Brit Sinai, then how we have the quick historical prologue followed by a Brit, and then continuing with entering the Brit. Why in Shechem we went to chapter 34 and 35 in Shemot, that's story of Dinah and Yaakov, and then the beginning of chapter 35. And then we saw also the parallel to Shechem in Bereshit. And then this is Bacharbi V'Kashti we talked about, with Yaakov's blessings to his sons. And that's for letter Iyun. And then we talked about how the speech in Devarim is going to relate to the speech in Yehoshua. And remember, because you Kiatem Yitatem Asher Banu Beretz Mitzrayim and you saw Vitur Shukasehem. And then that's all from Brit Nitzavim. Okay. So the one last line. Let's go back now, one more source sheet. Our little outline of Yehoshua. Okay, outline Yehoshua. So what did we do so far? Because our last class in Yehoshua, and next week we'll do a class on Sefer Shoftim. So the first 5 chapters, we prepare for conquering the land. Chapters 6 and 12, we conquer the land, but we follow the progression of miracles. Wherever we take a initiative, God comes to help us. Each miracle maybe is not as strong, but there's God's involvement in less of a miraculous way. So first, like bring down the walls of Yericho, and then Shemesh B'Givon Dom, and then finally with some strategy in the battle, and finally just happening, a good set of coincidences that we talked about last week with the Givonim and how that led to taking all the walled cities without having to lay a siege. Now in the Nachalah, chapters 13 are the 2.5 tribes who take initiative. Chapters 14, 15, 2 full chapters of Yudas Nachalah, they take initiative. Chapters 16, 17 is the initiative that's taken by Bnei Yosef, Ephraim and Menachem, and that led in chapter 18 with the 7 tribes who didn't take initiative. And what I want to explain now is I'll end the shir with a quick insight of what happens in chapter 18. So let me stop the share and open up Yehoshua chapter 18. I want to explain why most of the tribes don't take initiative, and there's a very good reason. If you ever went to Camp Moshava or a similar summer camp, if you have a good time in camp, you don't want to leave. Now, let me open up Yehoshua. Oh, wrong share. Yehoshua, here we go, chapter 18. Yehoshua chapter 18. Where are we? Right here. Oh, here we go. No, move that up. Okay. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 are tremendous detail about the Shvatim who took initiative. Now, chapter 18 will be an introduction to the last 7. A lot of detail about Binyamin, and then all chapter 19 is the rest of the other 6 tribes, with a couple lines about each one, because they didn't take much of initiative. But where does Yehoshua gather the people? After the first wave of conquest, Yehoshua gathers the people in Shiloh, and they bring the Mishkan to Shiloh, and the land was, again, there's military conquest, there's no longer an existential threat we talked about, but there's a lot of Shvatim that didn't take their Nachalah, 7 Shvatim. We talked about that last week. Now, why is Yehoshua moving the Mishkan to Shiloh? Where was the Mishkan till now? And then wait, one more line. And Yehoshua tells the people, why are you guys being weak? Remember, Nipim? Why guys are not taking initiative to conquer the land and finish settling it like God promised you? Remember, if God's giving you, He's giving you the opportunity. I told you last week, God's not giving us the land, He's giving us the opportunity to conquer the land, and He'll help us to do it with us, not for us. So that proves my point. Now, what I'm going to share with is, why is Yehoshua moving the Mishkan to Shiloh? Where was the Mishkan up until now? In Gilgal. Now, if you've ever been in Gilgal in a Tiyul, in the area of Yericho, you look up and what do you see? You see the mountain range. But whoa, you follow? You're next to a big river, lots of water. You haven't had water like that in ages. You've been in the desert for 40 years. You've got this great source of water. You have fields, etc. The heat doesn't bother you. You've been living in worse heat for the last 40 years. We think it's bad in Yericho, but to them that was like, it was like Gan Eden, like Chumash says, remember? Kikar Yarden is like Kegan Hashem Keretz Mitzrayim, Kegan Hashem. And there's no longer an existential threat to your existence. And what does Gilgal have? That Noah has the Mishkan. And nothing's changed. Why leave Gilgal? You follow? Now, and your leader tells you, or your crazy Zionistic fanatic leader tells you, see that mountain range? Go conquer these the nations up there, and they have walled cities and giants, etc. Why leave? Now, if they're about to attack you, your life is online, you'll sit and fight. But if there's no longer an existential threat, why leave a good deal? Especially what? If you have the Mishkan in your backyard. And therefore, no one's leaving the Gilgal. What does Yehoshua do to get the people out of the Gilgal? It's like what they did in building Israel. You had to take down the caravans and they brought Olim, they put them in caravans. You had to kick them out of the caravans to get them to move to cities, to move somewhere. What Yehoshua is doing, in order to break down the camp in Gilgal and get the people to leave Gilgal and move to the mountain range, because the mountain range has to be conquered, he takes the Mishkan and moves it to the center of the mountain range, which is where? Shiloh. Now, it's not yet a Makom Sheyivchar Hashem, that won't be till the time of David. We'll talk about when we get to Sefer Shmuel. But I think Yeshua's move to move the Mishkan from Gilgal to Shiloh is part of his strategy and policy to get the people to leave Gilgal and conquer the land. And therefore, what does he do? He moves the Mishkan, and hence now the national center, the main shul now, is moving to the new neighborhood, to the center of the mountain range. Shiloh is marked between Shechem and Beitel, the center of Harei Shomron, which wasn't conquered yet. It wasn't done enough. It wasn't, remember, Bnei Yosef had problems taking because of all the forests there, etc. And to encourage settlement on the mountain range and get out of the Mishkan, he moves the Mishkan to Shiloh. So he's doing sort of religious reform, moving the Mishkan, making it more permanent, with the hope that will get people to move to the mountain range. What price did we pay for moving the Mishkan to Shiloh from Gilgal? The price we paid was Sefer Shoftim. Why? Because is Shiloh ever mentioned in Sefer Shoftim? At the end of the book after the big civil war, right? But when people are scattered and the Mishkan's far away, people start shtiblach and hashkama minions and breakaway minions. And what's the example? Remember Pesach Micha? Is it a Beit Elohim? I'm going to give you a little introduction to Sefer Shoftim. What I want to explain is Yehoshua has a good reason to move the Mishkan from Gilgal to Shiloh. It's going to get the people out of Gilgal, hopefully. But the price we pay for that the Mishkan is far away from the people, and it's not a central location anymore. And getting to Shiloh is not going to be so easy. And there's no longer this national center in the middle of the camp. And the people are going to move, but instead of the people conquering the land's going to conquer the people, and that's going to lead to the Tzeichun Sefer Shoftim. So that was that last little point, that there's logic to what Yeshua does in chapter 18. And I'm saying he did a good thing, but in many ways, in certain ways, it backfired because the Mishkan is no longer a central place of worship, and later it's going to become corrupt, as we'll see later on. But we'll do that in Sefer Shoftim. So we'll stop here. Any other real quick questions? That was a quick review of Shoftim. Again, I'm going to, sometimes in each book, I'll deal with a summary of the book in general, but not a summary, but an insight about what the book is about, why it was written. And if necessary, I'll go into a specific chapter and do in detail like we did today. Nathan, question?
I'm curious about Yehoshua being buried in Timnat Serach and then Timnat Cheres. And I know that Cheres is a word for the sun, and Yehoshua made the sun stand still. But isn't Yehoshua compared to the moon elsewhere? And maybe that's not enough time for all this.
Oh yeah, those are cool topics. But don't be surprised that Yosef lives to 110 and Yehoshua lives to 110. And don't be surprised he's buried in Achala, and they take Atzmot Yosef with them, and the book ends with Atzmot Yosef and Yehoshua. Now, we'll deal later with the Nachalot of what this whole background will lead to, possibly to a split kingdom, because what's the center of the country? Bnei Yosef or Yehuda? Or Bnei Rachel and Bnei Leah? It's going to split a kingdom in a couple hundred years. There'll be a need to unite the kingdom, but who's going to lead the country, and why do we need 12 tribes, and why separate so far out? Life in the desert was, from a religious point of view, it's good to everyone living with the Mishkan in Gilgal. The second you leave Gilgal, don't be surprised you find out to worship. It's like going away to college. When you're in yeshiva, everything's fine. The second you're on your own, and you come back to yeshiva maybe in Chorvesman for a little bit, or come visit in the summer, it's not enough. Okay. It is centrally located, but on the mountain range. Shiloh is centrally located on the mountain range, but the people, it's centrally located geographically, but it's too far away for people to visit because it's not in the middle of Yehuda. It's not where the people settled. So Yehoshua is moving the Mishkan so people settle there. If anyone's from Toronto, you've heard of the Bayit. Now, that was this very wise businessman who bought a big plot of land, and he built a shul in the middle of a whole brand new neighborhood. And the whole community of Toronto moved to the shul. It's called the Bayit. I forgot what the name. It's called a Bayit in Tarte Mashma. It's got a Rosh Hashanah for something else, but it's a big shul that everyone daves in Thornhill, up in north. But that was a great idea. I start with a shul, and the shul brings people to, raises the real estate. It gets people to move there. But Shiloh wasn't Thornhill, if you know your American history or Canadian history. Okay. Anyway, everyone have a good week.